Officer Kemper thought he was confronting a loiterer. He didn't ask questions. He didn't check facts. But when the man calmly pulled out his FBI badge, the entire cafe, and the nation, held its breath. Isaiah Merrick didn't look like a man about to go viral. He looked like a man who wanted 30 minutes of peace. Black suit, no tie, a clean white shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearms. Just a laptop, a coffee, and a corner table at Bean and Bloom Cafe off Truman Road in Blue Springs, Missouri. He had pulled in from a 4-hour drive that morning. A security symposium in Kansas City was scheduled for the next day. A quiet afternoon was the plan, one he'd earned after 2 straight weeks of back-to-back interviews, case briefs, and red-eye flights. He was halfway through his cappuccino and scrolling through witness notes when the door chimed. A man in uniform stepped in, mid-40s, buzz-cut, sturdy build. Badge shining on the chest, not the belt. He paused in the doorway, scanned the room. That was Officer Todd Kemper. Kemper's eyes moved from the cashier to the booths, then stopped on Isaiah. His brow twitched. He didn't look away. Isaiah noticed. Of course he did. He didn't flinch or straighten up, just took another sip. He was used to being watched, used to the moment a stranger tries to calculate who you are based on what they think you are. Kemper walked up to the counter, whispered something to the barista. The barista, a young guy with curly hair, glanced over at Isaiah, then looked back. His mouth moved, but he didn't nod. Kemper turned, hand resting near his belt. He walked straight toward Isaiah's table. "You waiting for someone?" Kemper asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Isaiah looked up, eyes calm. "No, just working." Kemper's gaze dropped to the laptop, then back up. "This place is for customers." Isaiah gestured to his cup. "I am one." Kemper's stance stiffened slightly. "You've been sitting here a while. People are getting uncomfortable." Isaiah blinked once, slowly. "I wasn't aware anyone complained." Kemper didn't answer, just stood there, hands on his hips now. From the other side of the room, a woman pretending to type on her phone paused. A man near the window looked down at his newspaper. No one said anything, but the air felt different, thick. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Kemper said. Isaiah leaned back in his chair. "Have I done something wrong, officer?" "You're loitering. You're creating a disturbance." Isaiah smiled faintly. "You and I both know that's not true." Kemper's jaw tightened. "Are you refusing to leave?" Isaiah's hand moved slowly, calm, precise. He reached into the inside pocket of his blazer, pulling out a leather wallet. He flipped it open. It wasn't a credit card. It wasn't a license. It was an FBI badge. Special Agent Isaiah Merrick, Department of Justice, Division of Criminal Investigations. Kemper stared, then blinked, then stepped back. His hands dropped to his sides. His lips parted, but no sound came. Isaiah said nothing. He just held the badge there, steady. The woman with the phone had now raised it, recording. Kemper finally cleared his throat. "Apologies, Agent Merrick. I didn't realize." "You didn't ask," Isaiah replied. His voice was level, not angry, just matter of fact. Kemper gave a short, awkward nod. "We had a report from a nearby business. Suspicious person." Isaiah closed the badge holder and slipped it back into his coat. "I'm not that person. Never was." Silence again. The young barista behind the counter looked mortified. Kemper stood for a beat longer, then turned and walked out the door. The cafe didn't go back to normal. Not really. Isaiah finished his coffee without looking up again. The young man at the counter brought over a fresh cup without being asked. Set it down gently and whispered, "I'm sorry, sir." Isaiah just nodded once. He didn't want sympathy. He didn't want the room's attention. He just wanted the facts in his report to make sense. The ones back in Quantico, the ones that hadn't gone viral. Yet. But the footage now lived on someone's phone, and in less than an hour, the world would see what happened next. Rachel Landon hadn't meant to record anything that day. She had just stopped in for a chai latte on her lunch break, hoping to answer a few emails in peace. But when the cop walked in and locked eyes on the black man in the corner, something about it made her press record. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was experience. From her booth, she caught the whole thing. No zoom, no filters, just raw footage. When Officer Kemper started questioning Isaiah, the tone was clear to everyone in the room. It wasn't casual, it wasn't courteous, it was accusatory. Controlled, yes, but edged with something that made even the hum of the espresso machine feel awkward. The more Kemper spoke, the more eyes turned. No one said a word, but people noticed how fast the situation escalated. Rachel's camera stayed steady. She had a perfect shot of Isaiah's expression, composed, unmoved, a still frame of someone used to this kind of scrutiny. She could see how Isaiah held back words that would have been justified, how he managed to keep his voice level. Others in the cafe started to pick up on it too. The older woman seated near the front turned in her chair slightly. A college student set his textbook down. A man near the door folded his arms and tilted his head, watching Kemper. It wasn't just the way the cop spoke, it was how he stood, slightly squared, ready to exert authority. But he hadn't asked Isaiah a single meaningful question. Not one. Isaiah, meanwhile, was precise. Every movement measured, every word chosen. You're creating a disturbance. Am I? You've been here long enough. How long is too long? I'm going to have to ask you to leave. On what grounds? By the time Isaiah revealed his badge, the atmosphere in the cafe had shifted. It wasn't tension, it was discomfort. The kind that sticks. And then came that moment, the one Rachel captured perfectly. The badge, the frozen look on Officer Kemper's face, the silence that swallowed the cafe whole. A long, blank stare, followed by a weak apology. A clumsy excuse about a vague report. And then a retreat. She stopped recording once the door closed behind him. But the moment didn't end when the cop left. The guy with the textbook looked around the cafe, then back at Isaiah. Man, that was wild, he said quietly. Isaiah looked up. His mouth tightened just slightly, as if to answer, but he let the comment hang. Another customer leaned in toward the counter. Who called it in? Anyone know? The barista didn't answer. He was still staring at the door, blinking like he hadn't processed what had just happened. Rachel didn't speak either. She looked at her phone screen. 12 minutes. The whole thing had been 12 minutes. She stared at the thumbnail of the video. Isaiah holding up his badge, eyes sharp and steady. That look stayed with her. Something in her gut said this wasn't just another awkward encounter. It wasn't just about one man being profiled. It was about a moment that could shift something, if it got seen. She saved the video, opened Instagram, thought about it for half a minute. Then she wrote, "This happened at Bean and Bloom today. He said nothing, did nothing, just sat and drank coffee. Then this officer tried to make him leave. Watch what happens when he shows his badge. His FBI badge. This is what real composure looks like. Share it." She posted it. At first, there were just a few likes. Then the shares started. Then comments. Then bigger accounts began to repost it. Within an hour, the video was on Twitter, Reddit, TikTok. Isaiah didn't know it yet, but the internet already had opinions. Back in the cafe, Isaiah gathered his laptop and stood up. The barista called after him. "Hey, sorry again, sir." Isaiah nodded once, then walked out to the door, just like any other customer. No words, no fanfare. The woman near the window whispered to her friend, "Did you hear what he said?" "You didn't ask. You just assumed." That hit me hard. But the words hadn't just hit her. They were about to echo a lot louder than anyone inside that cafe could have predicted. Officer Todd Kemper didn't leave the cafe and go back to patrol like nothing happened. He sat in his cruiser just around the corner, parked behind a florist shop, hand on the wheel, staring through the windshield. He was sweating, even though the AC was on. He kept replaying the moment in his head. The wallet, the badge, those letters. FBI. He had no idea. He wasn't expecting that. In his mind, he had approached just another guy loitering in the wrong place. It's what he told himself. But even as he tried to justify it, his stomach twisted. Meanwhile, the video was picking up speed. By late afternoon, a thread on X, formerly Twitter, had already reached 25,000 shares. The comments weren't kind. You didn't ask. You just assumed. That line was now quoted on every major post, usually followed by hashtags like #profiling_exposed or Agent Merrick. But Isaiah wasn't on social media. He had driven to his hotel on the edge of town, a quiet place near a gas station and a diner, the kind of stopover that suited business travelers. He laid out his files, plugged in his laptop, and got back to work. The encounter at the cafe hadn't changed his routine. Not outwardly. He'd been trained to compartmentalize. He had done it all his life. But later that evening, when his phone rang and he saw the name Tonya Spears, he exhaled slowly before picking up. "You saw it?" she asked. "Saw what?" "Oh, don't do that. You know exactly what I'm talking about." Isaiah ran a hand across his face and sank into the bed. "I haven't looked." "Well, the rest of the world has," Tonya said. "It's blowing up." Tonya wasn't just a friend. She was his colleague, assistant special agent in charge back in the DC office. They'd been through a lot together. Isaiah didn't respond right away. "You okay?" she asked, her voice softening. "I'm fine," he said. Then added, "This isn't new, Tonya. It just got caught on camera." She paused. "That doesn't make it any less real." Isaiah glanced at his watch. "I've got to be up early. I'm briefing the Kansas City field team tomorrow." "Call me when you're done," she said. "For real. You don't have to carry it all by yourself." He hung up a few seconds later and sat quietly for a long time. Back at the Blue Springs Police Department, Officer Kemper was being pulled into the chief's office. Chief Ronald Keene wasn't one for dramatic speeches. A former highway patrolman, Keene preferred short, gruff sentences and blank expressions. He was the kind of man who never once smiled in his staff photo. "I need to know what happened," Keene said. Kemper tried to keep his voice even. "A report came in from Jack's pawn. Said someone was sitting in the cafe for too long, looking suspicious." Keene leaned forward. "So you went in, and what made you think he was the guy?" Kemper hesitated. "He was alone, hadn't ordered anything for a while. Just fit the description." Keene raised an eyebrow. "What description was that?" "Just said, tall male, sitting near the window, wearing dark clothes. That cafe has 4 people who match that right now," Keene replied. Kemper didn't answer. Keene tapped a pen against the desk. "You know who he was?" "I do now." Keene opened his drawer and pulled out a printout of the video. A still frame showed Kemper mid-sentence, and Isaiah, calm, focused, holding his badge. Below it, the headline, "Cop tries to remove black man from cafe. Freezes when he flashes FBI badge." "You're all over the internet, Todd." "I didn't mean—" "No one ever means to. That's the problem." Keene closed the folder. "I've got media calls, council members calling me at home. I've got to issue a statement by morning." Kemper's voice dropped. "Am I suspended?" "Not yet," Keene said. "But we're opening a review." There was a long pause. "You need to go home. Don't talk to reporters. Don't post a thing. We'll handle it." Kemper left the room, his thoughts a mess. Meanwhile, Isaiah was watching cable news in silence. They had just played the clip for the 3rd time in 20 minutes. A panel of commentators debated the bigger picture: racial bias, accountability, the burden of proof people like Isaiah carry everywhere they go. He turned the volume down. Not off, just low. But the volume on the outside world was only getting louder, and by morning, Isaiah's name would be trending in all 50 states. By sunrise the next morning, Isaiah Merrick's face was on national TV. News anchors ran clips of the cafe video between coverage of tropical storms and rising gas prices. Some used his name. Others just called him the FBI agent in Missouri. One show played the footage back-to-back, pausing on the moment his badge was revealed like it was a dramatic twist in a courtroom drama. But Isaiah wasn't watching. He was seated in a conference room at the FBI's Kansas City field office, dressed in a light gray suit, leading a morning briefing for new analysts. He went through case updates, intelligence leads, and a breakdown of a recent cyber attack in the Midwest. No one in the room mentioned the video, not even a glance. But he felt the shift in posture, the slightly too quiet room, the careful politeness. When the session ended, a young agent named Brandon Yee approached as the others filed out. "Sir," he said cautiously, "I saw the video last night." Isaiah looked up from his notes. "Did you?" Brandon nodded. "I just wanted to say, that was handled with a lot of grace." Isaiah didn't respond right away. He studied Brandon's face. Honest, maybe a little nervous. "Grace is a funny word," Isaiah said finally. "People only use it when they expect you to blow up, but are surprised you didn't." Brandon blinked. "I didn't mean—" "I know," Isaiah cut in, gentler this time. "It's all right. Just remember what you saw, not the badge. The part before that." Brandon nodded slowly, absorbing that. "Carry on, Agent Yee." Isaiah returned to his laptop and pretended to focus on his screen. But his mind drifted. The reveal had landed like a hammer. Back in Blue Springs, Rachel Landon's inbox was a mess. Local stations, national bloggers, a morning show producer from Los Angeles, everyone wanted to talk. She hadn't replied to any of them. She worked in finance, not journalism. She didn't want a spotlight. Still, she couldn't stop reading the comments under her post. "This is exactly why we record. Notice how calm he stayed. That's not easy. The fact that he had to prove he was FBI just to be left alone, that's the problem." A few trolls had tried to twist it, said things like, "Maybe he looked shady," or "Cops are under pressure. Stop making them afraid to do their jobs." But the overwhelming majority weren't buying it. At the police department, Officer Kemper wasn't back on duty. He sat in a back room, alone with a departmental laptop, tasked with reviewing training modules on implicit bias. It felt like a punishment in disguise, and it stung. He kept checking his phone, scrolling through anonymous posts on forums, reading every time his name popped up. There was a part of him that wanted to scream that he wasn't racist, that he didn't mean for it to go that far, that he had good instincts, and this was just a misunderstanding. But even he didn't fully believe that, because deep down, he knew what had happened wasn't about instinct, it was about assumption. In Washington, D.C., Tonya Spears sat in her office watching a news segment on Isaiah. She shook her head. "About damn time people started seeing what we've been saying for years," she muttered to no one in particular. She thought about calling Isaiah again, but she also knew he needed space. That evening, back at his hotel, Isaiah stepped outside just before sunset. The air was warm, the parking lot quiet. He leaned against his rental car and checked his phone for the first time that day. Over 170 missed messages. Colleagues, journalists, old classmates, his sister in Maryland, a pastor from Baltimore he hadn't seen in 15 years, all reaching out, all wanting to say something. But one message stood out, from a number he didn't recognize. "Thank you. I showed the video to my son. He's 12. He asked why the cop was so mean. I didn't have the words, but you gave me something to show him about how to stay calm and proud." Isaiah read it twice, then locked his phone. He didn't need viral fame. He didn't need a platform. He just wanted to do his job and go home in one piece. But this wasn't going away. And somewhere between quiet dignity and national headlines, Isaiah realized he now carried something heavier than a badge, and the weight was only growing. By Friday morning, the video had crossed the 1 million view mark. It wasn't just online anymore. Local stations in Kansas City were camped out in front of the Bean and Bloom Cafe, asking customers if they had seen the moment. Some said yes, some pretended they had. The manager, a soft-spoken woman named Gina Clemens, kept her head down and turned away every camera crew. "We serve everybody," she told one reporter before locking the front door early. "That's all I've got to say." But the story had already slipped beyond the cafe walls. It hit national radio. News podcasts picked it up. One morning segment on NPOSTI spent 12 minutes analyzing the power of pause in the confrontation, that long beat between Isaiah showing his badge and Officer Kemper backing away. In Blue Springs, the mayor called for an independent review. The police department issued a vague statement about reaffirming commitment to community trust. Online forums exploded with heated debate. Some commenters wanted Kemper fired. Others blamed training. A few tried to steer the story toward both sides. But the general mood wasn't neutral, because there was something deeply relatable about what people saw. A man, sitting quietly, doing nothing wrong. Accused, interrogated, threatened. Then a badge. A sudden switch in tone. A different kind of respect. One earned not by presence or behavior, but by proof. That's what stuck. At a small table in a Minneapolis apartment, Jonas Fields, a father of 3, played the video for his teenage son. "You see that?" Jonas asked. "Yeah," his son said. "He didn't yell or freak out." "Exactly." Jonas paused the clip on the frame where Isaiah holds up the badge. "You shouldn't have to show credentials to be treated like a person. But when you walk into some places, that's how it is." His son leaned in. "Wouldn't it be better if the cop asked questions first?" Jonas smiled. "Yeah, wouldn't it?" In another part of the country, Maya Renner, a sociology professor at Arizona State, included the video in her race and media lecture. She asked her students not to watch the badge moment first, but to study the first few minutes instead. "Tell me," she said, pointing at the screen. "What has this man done wrong here?" Silence. Then a girl in the front row said, "Nothing. He's just there." Exactly. And that was the point. Isaiah, meanwhile, tried to live as if the world wasn't watching him. He finished his meetings, kept his voice steady, answered emails like usual. But there was no ignoring it now. The hotel concierge recognized him and offered a free breakfast voucher for the trouble. A TSA agent at the Kansas City airport shook his hand, told him, "I saw you hold it together, sir. Much respect." And at a gas station outside Columbia, Missouri, a woman leaned out of her car window and said, "You handled that better than I ever could." He smiled, nodded once, and kept pumping gas. In D.C., his sister Alondra left a voicemail that made him pause before deleting. "I just want you to know. I'm proud. Mom would be too. I know you don't like attention, but people need to see what you did. Because it's not just you. It's every single one of us who had to sit there and swallow it." Isaiah didn't call her back. Not yet, because the attention was beginning to change shape. Journalists started requesting interviews. Newsroom producers tracked down his agency press liaison. There were think pieces, op-eds, and even a satirical skit on late-night TV. But something about all of it felt off to Isaiah. Like they were turning the moment into a performance. A scene people could analyze without living it. A clip to pass around and clap for without asking why it happened in the first place. Back in Blue Springs, outside the police station, a quiet group gathered with signs. One read, "Assumption is not probable cause." Another said, "Ask before you accuse." Isaiah saw the photos online. He didn't retweet them, didn't comment. Instead, he opened the message from that unknown number again. The one from the parent who said thank you. He read it twice. Because no matter how loud the world got, that was the only feedback that felt real. But while Isaiah stayed quiet, the department was being forced to speak, and what they said next would decide whether the pressure faded or lit a fuse. Before the world knew his name, before the badge flipped open on that cafe table, before his calm silence became a symbol, Isaiah Merrick was just a kid from southeast Baltimore who kept his head down and his mouth shut. Born in 1989, he grew up in a neighborhood where the sidewalks cracked early and stayed that way. His mother, Cynthia Merrick, worked nights at Johns Hopkins as a respiratory therapist. His father wasn't around long enough to remember. Isaiah didn't talk much as a child, but he noticed everything. Which lights stayed on late, which cops drove slower past their block, which teachers expected trouble, and which ones left you alone if your homework came in folded but done. He spent most of his afternoons at the Enoch Pratt Free Library, sat in the back corner and read anything with a government seal on the cover, FBI, CIA, DEA. The fiction didn't interest him. He wanted real-world puzzles, real answers. By 14, he had memorized sections of the Federal Penal Code without meaning to. His uncle, Leon Merrick, a retired Marine, was the first one who said it out loud. "You're not built for the street. You're built for the system. So go learn the damn system." Isaiah listened. He got into Towson University, paid for most of it through a patchwork of scholarships and late-night security jobs. Studied criminal justice with a focus on cyber investigations. After graduation, he applied to Quantico. Got in. Quietly, of course. No celebration, just a quiet nod to his mom, who left him a note in his luggage that read, "Don't forget who you are." Quantico wasn't easy, but it wasn't new. He'd been surviving pressure since the 4th grade. By 27, Isaiah was working white-collar crimes in Philadelphia. By 30, he was pulled into a joint task force on identity theft and document fraud. That's where he met Tonya Spears. She noticed the way he asked questions, not just to gather facts, but to test silence, to see who broke first. She told him once, "You don't push, you wait. That's what makes you dangerous." He took it as a compliment. Over the next few years, Isaiah moved steadily through the bureau. No headlines, no scandals, just work. Good work. He wasn't flashy. He didn't care about ceremony. He cared about precision, facts, and staying 2 steps ahead of the noise. Which is why the cafe incident rattled him. Not because it was new, but because it wasn't. Because in that moment, with a coffee in one hand and his laptop open, he wasn't Special Agent Merrick. He was a tall, well-dressed black man in the wrong part of town, again. It wasn't the first time, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. There was that time in Dallas when a hotel security guard followed him to his room even after seeing his keycard. Or the gas station in Indiana, where a clerk asked to see his ID after scanning his FBI credit card. Always a look, always a pause. But he never raised his voice. Never gave them more than they brought. He told Tonya once, after a particularly frustrating incident at an airport, "I wear this badge like armor, not privilege. And even then, it's only armor after they see it." So when people praised him for staying calm, Isaiah didn't take it as a compliment. He took it as a warning, that the bar for acceptable behavior was always higher for him. That one wrong gesture, one wrong word, and the headlines could have read something else entirely. Now, with the video making the rounds, friends from his past started reaching out. Not just to say they were proud, but to say, "I've been there too." One old classmate, now a defense attorney, wrote, "You didn't flinch. That was for all of us who couldn't afford to." Isaiah appreciated the messages, but he also knew something no headline ever captured. He didn't stay calm because he was trained to. He stayed calm because he had to. Because he'd lived enough life to know that anger in the wrong room could get you misread, misquoted, or worse, misremembered. He stayed calm because Cynthia Merrick raised him to be better than the noise. Because the badge might earn you a seat, but it doesn't erase the question marks people place on your back the second you walk through the door. But while Isaiah's story was coming into focus, another one was barely beginning. Because Todd Kemper had a history too, and the cracks were finally starting to show. Todd Kemper didn't think of himself as the problem. To his mind, he was just a guy who followed the rules. He'd been on the Blue Springs police force for 11 years. Before that, he'd done a few years with the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, married young, divorced at 34, lived in a rented townhouse outside Independence, drove a silver F-150, and kept a German Shepherd named Max. He was the kind of officer who signed up for the early shift and rarely called in sick. He never saw himself in headlines. Not like this. But when the video hit the front page of the Kansas City Sentinel and his face was splashed on every cable news channel under a caption that read, "Racist cop confronts FBI agent," everything changed. He stopped going to the gym. Didn't pick up calls from his brother. Didn't even return the messages from his union rep. The truth is, Todd didn't know how to process what happened, because in his head it wasn't about race. It was about procedure. A business nearby had called about someone acting off. He went to check it out. That's what cops are supposed to do. But what he didn't want to say aloud, what he couldn't admit even to himself, was that the description given was vague, and his decision to approach Isaiah first wasn't random. It was reflex. That's where the trouble lived. His personnel file wasn't spotless, but it wasn't dirty either. A couple of complaints filed over the years. Nothing serious, nothing that stuck. One incident involved a traffic stop where a driver accused Todd of pulling him over for existing. Another report claimed Todd was unnecessarily aggressive when breaking up a group of teenagers in a park after hours. Both complaints had been informally resolved. But now, those old files were being dusted off. The department had to respond to public pressure. They opened an internal investigation. Todd was put on administrative leave. Chief Ronald Keene wasn't happy about it, but he knew the optics. And he knew that what happened in the cafe wasn't just about Todd. It was about all the other Todds still walking around with unchecked instincts. Todd's partner from patrol, Officer Miguel Sharp, called him 3 times before he got an answer. "You all right?" Miguel asked. "I've been better." "Listen, man, this is bad, I'm not gonna lie. But you need to talk to someone. Don't just shut down." Todd sat at his kitchen table, staring at an unopened envelope from the department. "They think I'm a bigot." "No," Miguel said carefully. "They think you made a biased call. That doesn't mean they're calling you a bigot." Todd scoffed. "What's the difference now?" There was a long pause. "You know what hurts more than being called racist?" Miguel said. "Getting told you don't know how to listen." Todd said nothing. Because he hadn't listened. Not to Isaiah. Not to the barista who didn't confirm anything. Not even to himself. He walked in with a story already written in his head. And when the facts didn't fit it, he doubled down. And now the whole country had seen it. The thing was, Todd wanted to be a good cop. He really believed he was. But no amount of training modules or yearly reviews had taught him how to interrogate his instincts, how to press pause before acting. His father, a retired state trooper, once told him, "When in doubt, trust your gut." But what if the gut's been wrong this whole time? What if the gut was trained by a world that handed you the wrong blueprint from the start? Todd didn't sleep much that weekend. When he did, he kept dreaming about the look in Isaiah's eyes. Not fear, not anger, just disappointment. And somehow that was worse. Max, his dog, sensed something was off. Would sit by the door, whining, waiting for a walk that never came. Todd would sit on the couch and scroll, past the tweets, past the comments, past the think pieces, past the messages from people saying, "You messed up, man," and others saying, "Don't apologize, you did your job." None of it felt real. Because deep down, Todd didn't want to be remembered for this. He didn't want to be a symbol of everything wrong, but he also wasn't sure how to fix it. All he knew was that silence wasn't helping. But the department wasn't going to wait on Todd to figure things out. The public wanted answers, and the chief was about to make a decision that would send ripples through the whole city. The Blue Springs Police Department building sits on a quiet stretch of Main Street, sandwiched between a hardware store and an aging credit union. Most days, it's just another place people drive past without thinking. But not this week. By Monday morning, reporters lined the sidewalk outside the glass entrance. Some came from local outlets. Others wore badges from national networks. They weren't just here for sound bites. They were here for accountability. Inside, Chief Ronald Keene stood at the front of the department's community briefing room, flanked by the city's communications director and 2 officers from internal affairs. The lights were harsh. The podium smelled like old varnish. His notes trembled slightly in his hand, but his face stayed firm. He didn't like giving statements. He wasn't built for politics. But this wasn't optional. "Good morning," Keene began, voice steady. "As many of you know, there was a recent incident involving one of our officers and a federal agent visiting our city. The video from that incident has prompted concern, and rightfully so." He paused, eyes scanning the room. "We are reviewing Officer Kemper's conduct thoroughly. In the meantime, he has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of that investigation." Flashes from cameras popped. Reporters shouted over each other. "Will there be charges filed? Is Officer Kemper cooperating? Has the department apologized directly to the FBI?" Keene raised a hand. "I'm not here to give legal opinions. I'm here to acknowledge a reality. What happened should not have happened." That sentence made the evening news. Back at FBI headquarters in D.C., someone forwarded the clip to Tonya Spears. She watched it in silence. She appreciated the words, sure, but she also knew how often statements like that were meant to calm storms, not change climates. Later that day, the mayor of Blue Springs, Trenton Ames, posted an open letter on the city's official website. "We must recognize when our systems fall short. That means acknowledging when someone is treated differently, not because of what they've done, but because of how they look. What happened to Special Agent Merrick was not only wrong, it was unacceptable. Our city must do better. The letter circulated quickly. Several local churches read it aloud during evening services. High school civics teachers printed it for classroom discussion. Even the Chamber of Commerce issued a statement urging ongoing bias training for all city departments. The ripples kept growing. At Bean and Bloom Cafe, Gina Clemens reopened with a new sign taped to the counter. Everyone is welcome, period. A few customers came in and thanked her for how she'd handled things. Others stayed quiet but left larger than usual tips. She didn't want praise, she just didn't want anyone else to sit in fear over coffee. Meanwhile, Isaiah sat quietly in a government sedan, heading east from the airport with another agent behind the wheel. His trip was over. His face was still all over the internet. He hadn't spoken publicly, no interviews, no tweets, no press conferences. But that was about to change. Back at his home office in Arlington, Virginia, he opened an email from a non-profit group that tracked law enforcement misconduct and reform policy. They asked if he would be willing to speak at an upcoming panel. The message was respectful, direct. "We don't want a quote," it read. "We want your experience, your insight, your truth." Isaiah sat with that for a long time. Then he called Tonya. "You think it's worth it?" he asked. She didn't hesitate. "You've been living this your whole life. Might be time the rest of them listened." Isaiah wasn't eager to become anyone's symbol, but he also knew the moment had outgrown his silence. People weren't just talking about him, they were learning from him, or trying to. And if his voice could carry something deeper than a viral video, maybe it mattered. Back in Blue Springs, inside the department, Chief Keene closed his office door and stared at his own reflection in the window. He had been on the job for over 20 years, and still he was learning where the cracks lived, not just in the walls, but in the culture, in the gut reactions, in the blind spots nobody wanted to name. He picked up the phone and called the State Attorney General's office, not to dodge a bullet, but to begin a real audit of the department's practices, past and present, because pressure from the public might spark a fire, but real change takes people on the inst choosing to do more than cover tracks. When Isaiah Merrick finally agreed to speak, he didn't choose a TV studio or a press conference. He chose a folding chair on the stage of a community center in Southeast DC, just a few miles from where he grew up. The room was packed but quiet. Teachers, parents, teenagers, retired city workers, all of them sitting shoulder to shoulder, waiting. No podium, no media crews, just a microphone, a bottle of water, and a modest banner behind him that read, "Voices in Action, Community Forum on Policing and Perception." Isaiah stepped up wearing the same simple black blazer he wore during field interviews. No tie. His voice wasn't booming, but it didn't need to be. "I've been told I handled myself with restraint," he began, eyes scanning the front row. "That I stayed composed, professional, measured. But let's be honest, I didn't have a choice." The room leaned in. If I had raised my voice, if I had stood up too fast, if I had made the officer feel threatened, even for a second, you might not be hearing from me at all. No one clapped. No one needed to. He paused, letting the weight settle. See, for a lot of us, composure isn't a virtue. It's survival. It's conditioning. It's the knowledge that in certain places, in certain moments, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. So you overcompensate. You smile more than you want to. You sit a little straighter. You speak slower. You lower your gaze. He shifted slightly, gripping the sides of the chair. And in that cafe, I wasn't an FBI agent until I proved I was. I wasn't a customer until I proved I was. I wasn't harmless until I proved I was. That's what people are reacting to in that video. Not just how I responded, but what it took for that response to matter. Someone near the back wiped a tear. A teenager in the second row whispered to his mom. "He talks just like us." Isaiah glanced at his notes, but didn't read from them. "This isn't about one officer, and I'm not here to call for revenge or punishment. That man made a decision based on a story in his head. A story that's been written for generations. One that says certain people, in certain places, don't belong unless they can justify their presence. He took a breath. I shouldn't have to flash a badge to be treated with respect. Neither should a janitor, or a teenager, or a mother, or someone walking home from work. Your job or your title shouldn't be the price of dignity. This time there was soft applause. Not a standing ovation, just a long, respectful wave of appreciation. When the forum ended, a line of people waited to shake his hand. Some just nodded quietly. Others shared stories. About being followed in stores, about being stopped just to check, about the weight they carried in everyday life. Isaiah didn't rush anyone. Back home that night, he sat at his kitchen table with a cup of ginger tea and reread the remarks he hadn't needed to use. A few lines still lingered. Sometimes we talk about progress like it's a straight road, but progress is a fight against habits. Some learned, some inherited. We're not asking for special treatment, just a fair shake. A seat without suspicion. He folded the paper and slid it into a drawer. He hadn't gone viral for what he said. He went viral for what he didn't do, for what he withheld. But now, speaking directly, plainly, without apology, he felt something shift. Not out there, not on the internet, but in the people who came to listen, in the questions afterward, in the 12-year-old boy who said, I want to be like you, but I don't want to have to be like you. Isaiah smiled at that. Later that week, he got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a simple note. I was wrong. I watched the footage again. Not just once. Over and over. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to say it. I'm learning. Slowly. He didn't know who wrote it, but he didn't need to. Because sometimes accountability doesn't arrive with a press release or a headline. Sometimes it comes quietly, sincerely, when no one's watching. But even as the noise died down and the story drifted off trending pages, the lesson remained, etched into every parent's warning, every classroom debate, and every quiet act of reflection. It's been 3 weeks since Isaiah Merrick's name first made headlines. The video stopped trending a few days ago. The talking heads on cable news moved on to the next story. But in Blue Springs, Missouri, the conversation hasn't faded. The community center on Harper Avenue now hosts weekly forums, not just about policing, but about assumptions, everyday bias, and the difference between seeing and listening. Pastor Lydia Boone, who helped organize the first one, says she's never seen this many people show up for a town meeting. It's not about yelling anymore, she told the local paper. It's about asking each other, why did this feel normal before, and why can't it happen again? The police department, under pressure and public review, adopted new protocols. Officers are now required to document all non-consensual interactions with civilians, including those that don't result in citations or arrests. A civilian board was created to review patterns, and every officer, from patrol to the chief's office, will attend quarterly bias and de-escalation training, not as a checkbox, but as mandatory hours toward active duty. Is it perfect? No. But it's movement. And movement is rare without a moment. Back in D.C., Isaiah kept working. He never took the media offers, never wrote an op-ed. He let others dissect the footage. He stayed with the work. The field cases, the interviews, the endless paperwork. But something had changed in him. Not his professionalism, not his approach, but his willingness to speak when it mattered. At a conference for new agents, he was invited to speak on professional conduct. Instead, he talked about growing up in a neighborhood where people assumed you were guilty before you spoke. He told them that respect wasn't about title, it was about discipline, about restraint, about choosing the hard road every time. He said, "You'll be tested out there, not just by suspects, but by your own beliefs, what you've inherited, what you haven't examined. The badge doesn't clean that up for you. That's your job." Several trainees later told organizers it was the most impactful session they'd attended. Still, Isaiah remained mostly in the background. That's how he liked it. But the echoes of what happened in that cafe kept reaching farther than he ever expected. One afternoon, he got an email from a former police officer in Ohio. I left the force a year ago after realizing how many times I let my instincts guide me instead of facts. Watching your video made me sit down with my sons and talk about all the things I used to overlook. Thank you for reminding me silence can be powerful too. Another message came from a high school principal in Phoenix. We showed your video to our 11th graders. We asked them to write about how they've been misjudged. The stories we got back were overwhelming. You gave them a language we hadn't reached before. And maybe that's the part that mattered most. Not the fame, not the badge, not the viral numbers, but the fact that the moment, one small moment in a cafe that could have gone so many ways, reached people in ways policies never could. Isaiah didn't want to be a symbol. He didn't need that. He just wanted people to stop writing each other's stories before hearing the first sentence, because that's what had happened in Blue Springs. Officer Todd Kemper had seen a man in a suit and made up a story in his head. And to his credit, weeks later, he tried to write a different one. In a private meeting with community leaders, Kemper stood in front of a small group and admitted what most officers never say aloud. I made a call without facts. I saw something and filled in the blanks. I didn't ask questions. I let the wrong instincts lead. He didn't cry. He didn't make excuses. He just said, "I've got to do better." And not just when it's public, every single shift. That statement never made the news. But Pastor Boone was in the room, and she told her congregation the next Sunday, "Change doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it's a quiet decision to see people differently." So where does that leave us? Maybe this story wasn't just about a cop and a badge. Maybe it wasn't about viral moments or trending tags. Maybe it was about the smallest, hardest thing of all: accountability. The kind you can't legislate. The kind that shows up in what you choose to see, what you choose to question, what you're willing to unlearn. Because in the end, it wasn't Isaiah's badge that made the difference. It was his patience, his choice not to escalate, his refusal to be reduced. And if you're still listening, still watching, maybe the real question is, what story are you still telling yourself when someone walks into the room? If this story moved you, think about the conversations it could spark in your own circle. Share it, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories that challenge how we see the world and each other.